Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we like to say, we plunge headfirst into a topic. And today, it's something that really shapes how we work. Organizational design.
Yeah.
Whether you're running a team or you're trying to, swim through a big company or even just organize your own to-do list, this stuff can be like a total game changer.
It's true. We often just kind of accept how things are structured, right? Like we don't stop to think, is this actually working? Is there a better way to design all this?
Exactly.
It's like, living in a house and never really thinking about the layout. Like, are the rooms arranged in a way that makes sense?
Makes sense, yeah.
Could it be better?
But that's where our deep dive comes in today. So we're taking those excerpts you gave us from the book Organizational Design, a step-by-step approach
Yes.
by Burton, Obel, and DeSanctis. And basically, we're going to pull out the insights that make you go, aha, that's why things are the way they are.
It's like getting a cheat sheet, right?
Yeah.
To how organizations really work.
I like that.
Not just like understanding it, but learning how you can use that knowledge to your advantage.
A cheat sheet to the corporate jungle. Love it.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that jumped out at me from the book is this idea of balancing efficiency with effectiveness.
Yeah.
And it seems like every company is trying to do both.
Right.
But the authors are saying maybe we shouldn't be.
Yeah. They make this distinction between doing things cheaply, so that's efficiency, and then doing the right things, regardless of the cost. So that's effectiveness. And what they're saying is not every organization needs to be like a master of both at the same time.
So not a jack of all trades, more like pick your superpower.
Exactly. Think of Southwest Airlines. Their strategy is all about efficiency.
Right.
Low fares, quick turnarounds, no frill service, just getting you from point A to B as cheaply as possible.
Makes sense.
And then you have companies like 3M who are all about innovation.
Yeah.
So they're willing to invest a lot in research and development, even if it costs more, because they're focused on creating those groundbreaking new products.
So they're not worried about saving a few pennies on paper clips if it means missing out on the next Post-it note or whatever.
Exactly. And what the book says is figuring out which of these goals is dominant efficiency or effectiveness. That's seal for designing a structure that actually works.
Like you lay the foundation before you start building the house, right?
Exactly.
So this leads us to the next concept, strategy.
Yeah.
I love how the authors use categories like defenders and prospectors.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about how companies approach, innovation and competition, right?
Yeah.
So you have your defenders like Lego. They built an empire on one core product, those iconic bricks, and they focus on what they do best, making and selling those bricks efficiently.
But didn't Lego almost go bankrupt at one point? So even defenders can't just sit back and relax, it seems.
That's a great point. And it shows why it's so important to understand the environment your organization's operating in. So before the 2000s, Lego was very much a defender, right? Focused on efficiency on their core product. But then the market changed. Kids started wanting, more than just basic bricks. They wanted these complex themed sets.
Right.
Lego, still clinging to that defender strategy, almost went under.
So they had to adapt and become more of a prospector, embracing new ideas.
Exactly. They had to shift to focusing more on effectiveness. So investing in new products, themes, even getting into movies and video games.
Wow.
And that move, becoming more of a prospector, that's a big reason why they're so successful now.
It's a great lesson. Even the biggest companies have to evolve.
Right.
So we've got our defenders focused on efficiency, sticking with what they know, and our prospectors always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
What about the companies that are somewhere in between?
Yes, the analyzers. These companies try to find a balance between exploiting what they already do well, their existing stuff, and then exploring new opportunities.
So it's kind of like a tightrope walk.
It is. But when it's done well, it can be really effective.
Do you have any examples of, analyzers doing this well?
Oh, yeah. IBM is a classic example. So they use both open source systems like Linux, which keeps costs down,
Right.
and their own proprietary technologies where they can really innovate.
So they're dipping their toes into both pools.
Yeah. They're constantly evaluating, adjusting, trying to stay ahead of the curve.
It's amazing how different companies find their own paths to success. But, no company operates in a vacuum, right? The environment they're in has a huge impact.
Absolutely. The book talks about the complexity of the environment, so how many moving parts there are, and then the unpredictability of it all.
Oh, yeah, that can be stressful.
It can.
Imagine running like a global airline.
Oh, I know.
Fuel prices going up and down, pandemics, it's a lot.
It is. And that's actually one of the categories they use in the book, turbulent, to describe those environments that are complex and unpredictable.
Okay.
On the other hand, a calm environment would be more like a small local business, right? Not a lot of competitors, pretty stable demand.
Right, right.
Steady as she goes.
So we have these two dimensions, complexity and unpredictability.
Yeah.
And they create 4 different types of environments. It's a good way to think about where your organization fits in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And understanding that environment, that's key to choosing the right structure for your organization.
Oh, that's what we're diving into next.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about structure, we're not just talking about those boring org charts, are we?
No, not at all. The book goes beyond just the hierarchy and looks at different types of structures, each with its pros and cons.
Yeah.
You've got the simple structure, common in small businesses. Then the functional structure, grouping people by their skills.
Right, like marketing, finance, all the usual suspects.
Exactly. Then we have divisional structures, maybe separate divisions for different products or regions. And of course, we can't forget the matrix structure.
Ah, the matrix. 2 bosses, conflicting priorities, sounds like a recipe for headaches.
It can be if it's not done well.
Yeah.
The book gives an example of this Italian appliance company, Merloni. They had to keep adapting their structure as they grew internationally.
So trying to find that balance between what local and global demands.
Exactly. They started with separate country organizations, then shifted to product lines, and eventually had to use a matrix to link their R&D with their brand activities.
So even within one company, you can have different structures.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Depending on the team, their needs, their goals.
It's like having different ecosystems under one roof. You might have a research lab that needs a really fluid structure, while the production line needs strict processes and hierarchy.
Exactly. And speaking of different ecosystems, this next part of the book really fascinated me. How companies handle knowledge. Are they hoarding it internally? Are they constantly searching for it? Or using technology to make it flow easily?
It's like comparing, I don't know, a secret society, a university, and the internet.
I love that analogy. All within the same company.
Yeah, it is. The book actually gives the example of a pharmaceutical company, right? They need to share very specific, complex knowledge about drug development.
That's not something you can just put in a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It takes a lot of face-to-face mentorship, real human connection.
So how about you? Think about your own organization. How does knowledge flow there? Is it open? Are there bottlenecks? Is it being hoarded?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if that's helping or hurting innovation, right?
Absolutely.
That's a good lead-in to our next topic, the people.
The people, yeah.
Because in the end, organizations are made of humans.
Right.
Each with their own skills, motivations, ways of working.
Absolutely. And the book does a great job of categorizing different work environments based on the types of people they attract. You mean those categories like the shop, the factory, the lab, and the office. They each feel like their own little world.
You do. So the shop, right, it's like that small, tight-knit group of, artisans, each with their specialized skills. The factory is all about those repeatable processes, efficiency. And the lab, that's where researchers have freedom to experiment.
Right.
Then you have the office, all about coordinating specialists, managing information.
It's fascinating how each of those needs a different management style, right? You wouldn't manage a lab researcher the same way as like a factory worker.
No, not at all.
So think about your experience for a second. Are you being managed in a way that fits the type of work you do? Are you a lab researcher stuck in a factory?
That's a good question to ask yourself.
Or maybe you thrive on structure, but you're stuck in a chaotic shop where no one knows what's going on.
Right.
It's all about finding that right fit.
It is. And even with the perfect structure, you need the right leadership to make it all work.
Absolutely. And the book goes beyond those simple leadership categories, like maestro or manager.
Yeah.
It looks at how leadership actually impacts the whole climate of the organization.
That's important. Yeah.
It's not just about the leader's personality. It's about how they create a culture, right?
Yeah.
One that supports the organization's goals.
Yeah.
A tense, fear-driven workplace is going to work very differently than one where people feel empowered to take risks and be open with ideas.
Huge difference.
The book even mentions a study. They looked at Danish companies and found that those with mismatched leadership and organizational climates, they performed much worse.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So these soft factors can have a real impact.
They can?
So what about your workplace? Think about the leadership. Does it create a climate that supports your best work? Or does it create unnecessary stress or stifle creativity?
It's something to think about.
It is. Now, we can't forget about all the systems that keep an organization running smoothly,
Right.
like coordination, control, information flow.
Yeah.
Those are like the operating system for an organization.
That's a good way to put it. And just like with computer operating systems, you have those rigid, rule-based systems, and then you have those more flexible, people-driven approaches.
And the key is to make sure they work together, right?
Yes. Finding the right balance between control and empowerment,
Yeah.
between structure and flexibility.
Especially with so many people working remotely now.
It's true.
It's not just about managing people in an office anymore.
Yeah.
It's about coordinating a workforce that's spread out all over the place.
Across time zones, continents.
It makes you wonder how companies are adapting their systems,
It's a big challenge.
It is,
But those who do it well can unlock so much potential.
for sure. Okay, we can't wrap up this part of our deep dive without talking about incentives.
Right, right.
Because we all like a little something extra for our efforts.
We do.
Whether it's, I don't know, recognition, opportunities to grow, even just a sense of purpose.
Absolutely.
But the book points out that it's not always about money. It's about finding the right system, one that matches your goals and motivates people to do their best.
A system that works, yeah?
So ask yourself, does the current incentive system at your work really motivate you? Or is it actually working against you?
That's a great question.
That's something to ponder as we go into the next part of our dive.
I'm looking forward to it. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Back again for more, yeah.
So before we went on break, you left us with a really interesting question, right?
Yeah.
About whether the incentives in your workplace actually motivate you.
Right. Do they actually get you to perform at your best?
It's worth thinking about, because incentives, they really do shape our behavior.
They do. They can be almost like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Like they can push us to do amazing things.
Right.
But if they're not aligned with the organization's goals, well, things can go sideways.
Absolutely. You can end up rewarding the wrong behaviors or even create, a culture of competition, distrust.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
So the book really emphasizes designing those incentive systems so they actually fit with the values and goals of the company.
And it's not always about money, is it?
No, not at all. Money is a factor. Sure, financial rewards can be effective.
Yeah.
But the book talks about other powerful motivators like recognition, opportunities for growth, even just a sense of purpose.
That feeling of belonging, being part of something.
Exactly. Those things can be super impactful, sometimes even more than just cold, hard cash.
Right.
It's about what resonates with people,
Finding the right mix of incentives.
Yeah.
The ones that get people fired up. And to D, help the organization reach its goals.
It's a win-win when you can pull it off.
It is. Man, we've covered so much in this deep dive already.
We have goals, strategies, environment, structure, knowledge, people, leadership, systems, incentives.
I'm like drinking from a fire hose.
It is a lot. But remember, the point isn't to memorize every detail, right?
Right.
It's about getting a new way to look at your organization, to understand it.
Like a new pair of glasses.
Exactly. So start asking yourself those critical questions. Like,
Yeah.
does your company's strategy actually match its structure? Is the leadership creating the right kind of environment for success? How is knowledge handled?
Is it helping or hurting innovation? All important stuff.
It is. And how does it all impact you as an individual within the organization, right?
Yeah.
Are you being managed in a way that lets you thrive, to contribute your best?
It's about becoming more aware.
Right.
So you can not only navigate the system, but actually have a voice in shaping it.
Exactly. Good organizational design. It's not just about efficiency, effectiveness. It's about creating a workplace where people can actually thrive,
I like
where
that.
they feel valued, where they're empowered to contribute.
More human-centered,
Absolutely. And the book has some cool examples of companies doing this, right?
Okay.
Moving away from those rigid hierarchies towards more flexible team-based structures.
It's like moving away from that machine metaphor, where everyone's just a cog, towards something more, I don't know, organic living, where people can adapt.
It is. And this connects with another concept from the book, the stages of organizational development.
Right.
They talk about how organizations, like living things, they go through a life cycle.
Mhm.
Birth, growth, maturity, and sometimes even decline.
Makes sense.
So you wouldn't expect a newborn baby to just get up and walk, talk.
Right.
Same with a startup company, you know? You can't expect it to have the same structure as some huge multinational corporation.
Totally.
Early on, it might be really simple, small team, everyone doing a bit of everything, driven by that initial vision.
Okay.
But as it grows, well, that simple structure might not work anymore. Communication breaks down, decisions slow down, you need to add layers, formalize processes, maybe even create those divisions we were talking about before.
And then as the organization gets even bigger, more mature, maybe those structures that worked before start to, I don't know, stifle creativity.
Yeah, it's that classic innovator's dilemma, right? You get so good at what you do, you miss the next big thing.
So companies need to be proactive,
They do?
checking their structure, making sure it's still working, or they risk decline.
It's about finding that sweet spot, right? Stability and agility, control and empowerment.
And it's interesting how this idea of a life cycle, it applies at so many levels, right?
It does.
From small teams to huge corporations.
Yeah. The principles are the same, understanding how all these different elements work together, and that change, well, it's going to happen.
Change is the only constant, right?
It is. So think about your own organization for a moment.
Yeah.
Where is it on this life cycle? Is it brand new, rapidly growing, or more mature?
Is the current structure helping it succeed or holding it back?
Good questions to think about.
Definitely. And that leads us to the final part of our deep dive into organizational design. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring all these fascinating facets of organizational design.
We have.
And before we wrap things up, I want to revisit something we talked about earlier. How companies handle knowledge. I really like that analogy you had about comparing different approaches to, like, a secret society, a university, or even the internet.
Yeah, it's a good way to picture those different styles of knowledge management, right?
Yeah.
And how they can either help or even block innovation.
So let's break down those analogies a little more. Let's start with the secret society model.
Okay.
What does that actually look like in a company?
So imagine a company where knowledge is like super closely guarded,
Okay.
shared only with a select few at the top. Information flows in a very controlled way, strictly up and down the chain of command. And there's a real sense of, need to know when it comes to accessing anything.
It's like a vault, you know.
Yeah.
Knowledge is locked away, and only certain people have the key.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder, how does that kind of environment impact creativity and problem solving?
Well, it can definitely create silos.
Right.
And limit the sharing of ideas. If people aren't encouraged to share what they know, or if they're afraid to ask questions,
Yeah.
you risk missing out on those breakthroughs that happen when different perspectives come together.
So what about the university model then? That sounds a lot more, I don't know, open and collaborative.
It is. In a company like that, knowledge is seen as something to be shared, something to be nurtured.
Okay.
They invest in things like mentorship, training, and they create those opportunities for people to learn from each other.
Like that saying, knowledge is power, but sharing knowledge is even more powerful.
Exactly.
And then we have the internet model,
Right.
where tech really helps knowledge flow.
Yes.
Think of those companies that use, Slack, Microsoft Teams, or even like super fancy knowledge management system.
Yeah, making information easily accessible to everybody.
Breaking down those silos, getting the right info to the right people when they need it.
Exactly. And what's cool about that internet model is it lets connections happen that might never have happened otherwise.
Interesting.
Like someone in marketing might come across something from the engineering team and boom, new campaign idea.
So as you think about your organization, which analogy fits best? Is it a secret society, a university, or the internet?
Or maybe it's a mix of all three.
Yeah, a hybrid approach.
Right. The key is to be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of each approach and then, advocate for the model that best fits your organization's goals and its culture.
We've covered so much in this deep dive, from goals and strategies to leadership and systems. But as we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to highlight one last point from the authors.
Okay.
It's this idea that organizational design, it's not about creating like a static blueprint.
Right.
It's about understanding how all these elements we've talked about, how they interact.
It's dynamic. It's not just setting things up and walking away.
Right. It's about recognizing that organizations are complex,
They are.
where decisions in one area can impact everything else,
Yeah.
creating those intended and unintended consequences.
It's like a giant web, touch one part and the whole thing vibrates.
Exactly. And those consequences can then feed back and influence future decisions. It's this continuous loop of adaptation.
Always evolving.
So it's not just about designing the organization, but continuously learning and adapting along with it.
That's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
and challenging for sure.
So as you continue on your organizational journey, remember this. You're not just a passive participant in some predetermined system.
You have a voice, yeah.
You have the power to influence things, to shape
Yes.
things, to create positive change.
And by understanding these principles of organizational design, you can be a better leader, a more engaged employee, and just, a more informed advocate for a better workplace.
We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on how these forces, often invisible, really shape our work lives.
And that you feel empowered, not just to navigate your organization, but to help it evolve.
And that's it for this deep dive. We'll be back next week with a brand new topic, ready to go deep all over again.
Until then, keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep making your organization and your world a better place.